I move amendment number 4 in my name. And Minister, I want to talk to my own amendment and to your amendments. And at the outset, Minister, I want to thank you for your engagement in relation to this issue. And this issue goes back nearly onto the original nursing home support scheme back in 2009. And very soon after the enactment of the nursing home support scheme, we found that there was an anomaly there in terms of family businesses or family farms. And you had huge financial burden being placed on families around the country as a result of that. And, you know, I'm very well aware of a case, and we all are, of a case in not too far away from myself, in an adjoining county, where a man with a very successful dairy farm, and sadly his wife contracted a long-term illness, ended up as a very young woman in long-term nursing home care. And that man with a young family has had to sell off parts of his farm to actually pay the nursing home bill. And the amendment that was brought forward in 2021 was to address that, not just for family farms but also for family businesses, because it could jeopardise the viability of many family businesses where the business was burdened with the cost of the nursing home as well as the day-to-day operation of the business. And there is a very significant commitment tied into this, in that the person that was designated as taking over the farm or business had to run it for the next 6 years. And that's a very substantial commitment. And the difficulty arose very quickly after this amendment came in. And I remember this coming in at the time, and I had a particular case of an individual whose second cousin once removed, the son of a second cousin, who is the man's nearest blood relative, nearest living blood relative, had taken over the operation of the farm, was rearing a young family on that farm, and took it over on the basis of this provision coming in. And I assured him that the legislation was robust in relation to it, because it clearly stated in black and white in the legislation that the person taking over the land had to be either 1, the partner of the person in long-term care, 2, a relative of the person in long-term care. And not only did this individual comply with that, they were actually the nearest living relative to the person in long-term care. And actually, the legislation went further, because it said not only were they eligible, but their spouse was eligible. Now, the difficulty has arisen because the HSE has taken a very rigid interpretation of the law. Now, I didn't raise this case at the time in 2021 because it provided in law for the case that I was talking about. Now, sadly, the legislation that you're bringing, the amendment you're bringing forward here, Minister, and I know your intention is to expand the definition. In fact, it's restricting the definition that is already set out in primary legislation. The difficulty is that the interpretation being taken by the HSE in relation to black and white legislation is very different. And as a result of that, this has caused huge hardship for that particular family, who are paying a substantial fee every single week in terms of long-term nursing home care for over 6 years now at this stage. And I have a second case where a first cousin once removed, who will be come in under this new restricted definition now, will be eligible in relation to it. But what I have tried to do with my amendment was to try and redraft what was set out in the original legislation that was enacted here in this House in 2021, in October 2021, that it was for a relative. And what I want to see is the small number of cases that were involved in it, that they would, where they comply with the other very rigid provisions in this legislation. Like, this legislation goes far further than what is actually set out by the revenue commissioners as the responsibility to farm the land. In that instance, in relation to the revenue commissioners, you must commit to farming the land for the subsequent 5 years. In this legislation, we're talking about it for 6 years. And the difficulty is, should something happen to that individual, should they pass away or through illness are no longer able to farm, the clock starts again in relation to it. And so there is a very limited and finite number of people that can actually avail of this particular relief. But sadly, for a number of unmarried people with land in rural Ireland, there is a small cohort of them that are caught in relation to this, where they don't have any siblings, they don't have any children of those siblings as a result of that, and we have to go out to first and second cousins to get that. And they are the ones that are actually taking over the farm. They are the ones that have taken care of that older person up to the time that they've gone into long-term nursing home care. They are the one that has taken over responsibility for the day-to-day operation of the farm, and yet they're being penalised in relation to it. And yes, the HSE's interpretation did allow for, and your original legislation did allow for first cousins, but the difficulty is, if you're asking, you know, a 79-year-old man to take over and commit for the next 6 years to farm the land for his 83-year-old first cousin that has gone into nursing home care, that doesn't work. And while I welcome your engagement, I thank you for your assistance up to now in relation to it, reluctantly I have huge reservations in the restrictions that are being brought forward here, but they're being forced upon us because of the interpretation by the HSE of the legislation passed here in 2021 with a very specific purpose.